Good morning, LBC Radio. My name is Corey Rosen, and you're listening to the Story Podcast. And today I have on a super awesome guest, Mr. Eric Wirsing. Eric began his musical journey career with piano at the age of 5. Shortly after beginning with piano, he also studied violin and drums. But at the age of 12, and that's when Eric received his first electric guitar. He realized his true passion and path in his musical life and has not put it down since. In the 30 plus years since striking those first notes, he has been deeply involved with music. Eric's obsession for the guitar led him to Berklee College of Music in Boston, Massachusetts in 1999. After leaving Berkeley with his future wife, Julie Schreiber, they moved to Harrisburg, PA, where Eric performed in the Julie Schreiber Band, sharing the stage with such acts as Halestorm, Lowen and Navarro, and the Badlees, and many, many more. While in Central PA, Eric taught guitar and bass professionally for 20 plus years. Eric advanced his own study of guitar through instruction from bebop jazz guitar legend Pat Martino, as well as world renowned fusion guitarist Greg Howe. In 2008, Howe hired Eric to transcribe and design the official guitar tab book for his most well known album, Introspection. After teaching professionally for a few years in 2011, Eric opened the doors to the Perfect Fifth Musical Arts Center in Mechanicsburg, where he was dedicated to bringing the best quality music education to the region. Eric kicked off the grand opening of the Perfect Fifth by arranging a master class with featuring world-renowned Grammy award-winning guitarist icon Steve Vai. In 2015, Eric co-founded the Central PA-based award-winning Rush tribute band Solar Federation, considered one of the premier female-fronted Rush tribute bands in the world. Solar Federation continues to perform to this day. Currently, Eric is also studying with Berklee professor Bruce Bartlett to advance his understanding of jazz guitar. Eric, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, I'm glad to have you here. You have a whole life, as most of us do.
Yeah, I'm getting old.
So tell me, you started off with playing piano. Was that a thing you wanted to do, or was that a thing your parents said, "Okay, just go play piano"?
Well, I'm glad you started with that. When I was young, I remember this all started with my mom. My
Mm,
mom she's a voice teacher now at the Pollock Center in Camp Hill, but she was an opera singer when I was a kid, and
really?
also a classical pianist. She has a master's degree in both. So I grew up hearing classical music in our house, and I think if you talk to a lot of musicians, like piano is a great instrument to get started on because
It's very
it
visual.
yeah, and it lays out like the music theory system in Western culture. It kind of lays it out in a very visual way. So I'm glad I started on the piano. I wasn't passionate about it like I am
Mm.
guitar though, and so I didn't practice as much as I do, but that's how I started. I was about 5 years old when I started in the piano, and then I think I did that for about 5 years. I always remember this one recital. I was so young. It was at a neighbor's house who taught piano, and I remember I started off my little piece, and I was so nervous, and I messed up, and then I stopped, and I looked around and looked at everybody in the audience, and everybody started laughing. And then I continued, and I somehow made it through the song, but that's one of my earliest memories of playing the piano and performing.
That's great. That's also really funny because that's like the worst thing you could ever do if you ever mess up is to stop and like look around.
Yeah, I definitely did that.
So you started with piano and then you weren't really passionate about it, but you also went into violin and drums. Why?
I think, I always gravitated towards, like, the toy guitars and stringed instruments.
Mm,
So I think my parents were just like, "Oh, well, let's try violin," and I was like, "Oh, that sounds cool." And I still to this day really like violin, but again, it's not it didn't, like, strike me, and I played it for a number of months and didn't practice as much as I should have, and, I think, if you find your instrument, you don't really have to force yourself to practice as much, you just
right.
want to. It also depends on maybe having the right teacher to start you out that inspires you too. But I just wasn't my thing, but I still love the violin. I think it's an awesome instrument.
Incredible instrument and incredible violin players around here too.
Yeah.
Drums?
That drums, I played that starting in middle school. I played the snare drum.
Mm.
And then eventually when I got into high school, they needed someone to play the drum set for the jazz band, and I was kind of like the only guy. So I don't think I did a great job because I had no way of practicing the drums at home. So I did what I could. I'm sure I angered my band teacher at that point, but um, at the same time though that I was playing the drums, I had started guitar.
Mhm. So tell me that experience, because that was something that really struck you, apparently.
Yeah, and I mean, I think you mentioned I started at 12, and I remember, uh, I got my first guitar for Christmas,
Mm.
and I'd been bugging my parents for a while, and they got me a Strat copy. I think it was made in Taiwan, and it was, like, red and with a white pick guard, and I was so excited. I thought that was the coolest thing, and I got a little Dean Markley practice amp, and I had no idea what to do on the guitar.
Right, of course.
I was listening to Metallica at that time, and that's what I wanted to play. So shortly after, we got lessons, and the first teacher that they found tried to open up a book in front of me and have me read music, and I just was not having it. And now I look back, and it actually probably would have been smarter for me to just hunker down and do that because I would be a super good sight
Mm.
reader by now. But I almost quit the guitar after about 3 months with the first
Wow.
person. He just wasn't the right teacher for me.
Yeah.
Then I started with Kevin Wire, and he was like a rock guy, and I was, like, hooked. He, like, inspired me to, get into Van Halen and all that stuff, and that's really took off, and I loved guitar from then on.
So you start off with guitar, and at what point do you start, like, performing with other people and working with, like, bands?
You know, that's something that I wish I would've, uh, pursued more. I was kind of a shy kid.
Mhm.
And there wasn't a lot of music opportunities where I grew up. I grew up in Olympia, Washington, and I wasn't good at seeking those out. So I played some. I think the first band that I was in, I forget the name we had for it, but it was with a bunch of older guys who were like 21, and I was like 14.
Right.
And I was like playing all these Eddie Van Halen riffs, and stuff like that. And I got pretty decent for my age. So that was my first band. I think we played a couple parties. It only lasted for about a year.
Mm.
Then I just kind of seeked out other little opportunities to perform, but I didn't get a chance to perform a ton. It wasn't until I got to Berkeley that I really got to perform a lot more.
Yeah, so tell me why'd you go to Berkeley? That's a big move from across the country.
Well, and that's a good question. I went to Berkeley because my parents, they weren't really into rock. They
Mm.
didn't know that whole scene. They didn't know how to get into it, and I didn't know how to get into it. And I knew I loved that stuff, like Steve Vai,
Right.
and Eddie and all those bands. And I was like, Berklee College of Music was kind of like a lighthouse in the distance for me. I was like, okay, I want something to happen. So there's this lighthouse in the distance. There's this light, and I'll go there, and hopefully something will happen.
Mm.
So, and I knew Steve Vai went there,
Oh,
and
okay.
some other notable musicians. So I auditioned and got in, and I remember flying out there for my audition, and um, I'd never been in a huge city like that before, and all by myself, and it was thrilling. And then I did my audition, flew home, forgot to loosen the strings on my jazz guitar, and
Oh,
then
no.
I started to tune it up when I got home, and I was like, "Why is it going flat every time I tune it up?" And then I looked up, and the headstock was bent forward like this.
And tell a guitarist why you should loosen your guitar strings on a flight.
Well, it's because just the air, uh, it's dry up there, but it's also the air temperature,
It's
is
cold.
yeah, and there's different pressure. So your neck can fluctuate, and if you have your strings, the string tension is tight. And I had like 13 gauge strings on my guitar for
Oh
jazz
wow.
at that point.
Yeah.
So it puts a lot of pressure on the neck, and it's just better to loosen the strings so it doesn't have all this tension on it.
Interesting. I knew I knew like air temperature warped it, but I never applied that to flight.
Yeah, I mean,
That's interesting.
any sort of like, different times of the year with different humidity levels and temperatures always like make, the, I mean, wood has some sort of water,
Right.
and resin in it. And if it gets to different temperatures,
It warps.
yeah.
So you come back. When did you find out that you were accepted to Berkeley, and how did that feel for you?
I think I got a letter in the mail, and I was very excited. I was like, oh my God, I'm going to Berkeley.
What did your parents think about that?
They were very happy. My parents were always supportive of, my passions, and they knew I mean, they saw how much I practiced. And, I think my mom was probably very happy to see me, pursuing music,
That's
you
good.
know.
So you move out to Boston. You go to Berkeley. I'm sure it was a gigantic culture shock for you going to small town USA, rural USA to big metropolis.
Yes.
What was that like? How, especially as a shy kid, as an introvert, I guess. What was that like for you?
It was exciting. At the same time, I was definitely out of my element. People in Boston are what one of the biggest differences between the West Coast and the East Coast is on the East Coast, people will tell you to your face what they're thinking.
Very
They're
direct here.
yeah, and I mean, people are assertive, and I think there's something really good about that because you know what they're thinking. Whereas in the West Coast, a lot of times people are nice to your face, and then
They go around behind your back and say
yeah,
stuff.
but
Yeah.
they're both. It's not one's not better than the other, and I mean, I shouldn't generalize that too
No, each
much,
have
but
their
yeah,
advantages, and it's definitely to
yeah,
each person. But I definitely up northeast, especially, they're very direct.
yeah, especially in Boston.
Yeah, Boston and New York both. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was exciting though at the same time.
So what was one of your favorite college experiences in Berkeley?
Oh wow, that's hard to think of. Man, I don't even know where to start. Uh, I would say performing, on stage with my wife
Hmm.
at the Berkeley Performance Theater. She'd been there a couple years before I got there, and she had a band, and I got to play with the band and play with her on stage, and that was a lot of fun.
Were you guys dating at the time, or were you just like friends at the time?
Well, Julie and I actually I'm sure she's listening and she's probably like, "Oh, you're gonna tell the story of how we met." And yes, I am.
This is the story podcast.
It's kind of a fun story. Julie is very good at mimicking animals with her voice.
Really?
Yeah, and I remember I was sitting, I think this was my 3rd semester there, maybe. It may have been my 2nd semester. And I remember my friend Kelly Kamenicki and I were sitting in Kelly was a guy,
Mm.
and, we were sitting in the cafeteria at Berkeley, and there was really nobody there except for these 2 girls sitting behind us, and all of a sudden I hear this, it's like a dolphin sound, and I'm like, "What was that?" And I turn around and I look at Julie, and she kinda looks at me like, "Excuse me?" And I'm like, "Was that you?" She's like, "No." And so then I turn around and I hear it again, and I turn around and I'm like, "That was you." And then eventually, Kelly and I sat with Julie and her friend, and we're talking with them. That's the first time I met Julie. Then I think the next semester, uh, this is where we officially met. Um, I was sitting with my friend Taylor, and Julie walks in, And I'm like, "Oh, yeah, that's that girl with the curly hair." And she had just released her first CD that
Mm.
day, and Taylor was like, "Oh, you gotta meet my friend Julie." And so Julie comes in, sits down, and we're chatting, and, Julie gives me one of her CDs, and, that was pretty much that. Just chatted for a couple seconds. I went back to my room and listened to that CD, and something, like, struck me about that CD, like, the first song, "Eternal Sky." I heard something in that that just struck my soul,
Mm.
and then every time I would walk into the cafeteria from then on, Julie and I would look at each other and smile, and eventually we just chatted, and she gave me her number, and then we had our first date, and we've pretty much been locked at the hip since. I mean, she became my best friend immediately,
That's
and
awesome.
I feel very lucky to have met her, and I feel bad sometimes because all my friends at Berkeley that I had at that point that I hung out with every day, I just stopped hanging out with them.
Mm.
I just wanted to hang out with Julie every day, and I think they look back now and understand.
Right, yeah. Sure thing. Julie is watching. You have to, oh, Julie,
Hi, Julie.
I want you on the show, and you have to, see if you can still do dolphin noises. I'm very interested. So, you joined her band. Was that your first band experience?
No, I'd been in a couple, like, bands before then. It just wasn't a ton of performance, like,
Gotcha.
but, the way I got into her band was, I think at that point, we weren't I wasn't really thinking of getting in her band, and she had a guitarist at that point.
Right.
But she had this show at the Whitaker Center that was coming up, and her guitarist, bailed out 2 weeks before the show, and so she's like, "Eric, do you think you," and I was like, "Yeah, yeah, let me see." So, um, that's how I started with the Julie Schreiber Band, and ever since then, I was in the Julie Schreiber Band.
And so, after Berkeley, you guys decided to move to Harrisburg. Why Harrisburg?
Um, I think because, I mean, it was a lot easier to go there than all the way over to Washington State, and I think, both my brother and I actually gravitated towards the East Coast because there's a lot of opportunities here,
Mhm.
for musicians. LA also too, but in Nashville, I believe. But I think we just saw a lot more opportunities on this coast, and I mean, it just was a lot easier to move to Harrisburg. Also, Harrisburg, it's close to a lot of big cities. It's within
Yes.
driving distance. So, and Julie had lived in Harrisburg for a long time, so it just,
Made sense. Yep.
yeah,
Yeah, that's what I love about the Central PA region. No matter if you're in like York, Harrisburg, Lancaster, even, or even Hershey. Like Philadelphia is like about an hour's drive. DC, Washington area is about 2 hours drive. Pittsburgh, if you want to go that far, is 3, 4 hours.
New York,
New York,
yeah,
3 hours exactly. Even if you want to go up north to back to Boston, it's only 6 hours. So it's only 6 hours, but still,
yeah. It's drivable.
it's drivable. Yeah, anything is drivable within a day, and you can go. Here's the great thing about the East Coast: it's all so small that once you're in New York, it's a really easy drive to Boston. Once you're in DC, it's a really easy drive down to Virginia and all these other places.
Yeah, and I actually haven't been to Boston, I think one time when Julie graduated after we left, but I would love to go up there, and I'm sure it looks totally different, but I'd love to go back and check out Boston.
I've heard that there's a lot of toll roads.
I'm sure, and they're probably very expensive.
Yeah, we went up to Boston for, the spring break. I told a story yesterday how it was a April Fool's prank on my friends. But long story short, we went up there and the toll roads, I think we came back with $200 worth of tolls, and I was like, "What?"
I know whenever, Julie and I have had to go to Long Island, there's, like, some tolls that are, like, $30 each.
And it's like,
Yeah, it's probably because there's so much upkeep
"Oh,
on those
yeah."
bridges because there's the I was, like, blown away when we went to, Long Island for the first time. I forget what the road is called, but it's like this highway where everybody, New York drivers are, like, surgical. They, like,
Yes.
drive super fast, but they're actually pretty talented at
Pretty precision,
driving,
yeah. They're very good.
but it was like it seemed to me at that point like it was like 100 lanes.
Mm.
It was like too much to process, all these cars going really fast and like all these lanes. And I think that there's a lot of upkeep that goes on with those.
Oh, I'm sure. I don't. I'm not. I'm upset about it in the fact that it's expensive, but I'm sure that it's required.
Yeah, I don't like it either, but it's probably
Yeah.
it's probably necessary.
So you come down to Harrisburg. You're still playing with the Julie Schreiber Band, and you play around with Halestorm, Lowen, and Navarro. And tell me about all of those experiences.
I think that I would say like with Hailstorm, that's a notable one to talk about because I mean,
They
Hailstorm is
made it.
like,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, and you know, it doesn't really surprise me so much that
Mm.
they made it because I remember Liz and RJ playing at I think it was the Midtown Tavern in Harrisburg.
HMAC, Midtown
Yeah,
Arts Center.
I don't think it was HMAC.
Okay.
I don't know if this place still exists.
Oh, I see.
But I remember going in there and, like, I think Liz was maybe 16 or 17, and she just had this amazing voice, like, a rock voice, and could play the piano, and they were just so into it, and their parents were very supportive of them, and they worked their butts off, and, so it doesn't surprise me because they have the talent, and they worked very hard. And I'm sure they still work very hard, and we've seen Liz a couple times since, and they're still extremely down to earth, very nice people,
That's
even
great.
though I think Liz is becoming like a Joan Jett type of figure, like an
Really?
icon,
That's awesome.
so but I think we opened we had them open for us.
You had them open for you guys.
Well, it's interesting, we put this show together at Stage 2 at the Whitaker Center once, and we asked them to open for us, but I'm like, "Julie, it it's kinda gonna go down in volume level if they open for us and then we play," because they're more of a heavier band.
Yeah.
So, we had them basically play a second because I just felt like the
Okay.
volume level should go up in a show and
There
get
should be
more.
a crescendo to a climax.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so that was like, that was one of the times we opened or they opened for us or whatever.
Whatever happened.
Yeah, and I can't remember the other times. Lowen Navarro, I think, was more Julie,
Mm,
but she knew of them because they've Julie would remember this, but Lowen and Navarro, they're like great songwriters.
mm,
So I think they wrote some very famous songs that other artists made famous, so they're well known in that way. I think the Badlees, I think we opened for them on a New Year's Eve at the Whitaker Center, which was pretty cool, because they're a pretty legit band.
yeah, and they're
They've
back at it.
Yeah, I saw at the Englewood. I think they played at the Englewood, not too long
Yes, they
ago.
did a few weeks ago. Yeah, I'm really excited for the Ballet's return because I was just listening to their music the other day and I was like, wow,
Yeah, they look great and they sound great, you
that's
know?
awesome. So you started teaching bass and guitar, and then you uh, met and started to uh, expand your knowledge through these guitar artists. Why did you feel the need that you wanted to expand your guitar knowledge?
You know, I I I love playing guitar and I always wanna learn. I always wanna be able to understand, how to play something that I don't already know how to play. So,
Right.
like, I mean, I always thought that if you can play jazz pretty well,
You can play
yeah, because you have to know the guitar neck very well to be able to improvise those lines, over these complex chord progressions.
right.
And so you have to know a lot of music theory. You have to know the guitar neck very well. So it kind of gives you a good start, of like, how do you improvise? Oh,
Mm,
sequences, patterns, like how do you use arpeggios, scales, all that kind of stuff, and it pretty much you can apply that to if I wanted to enhance my blues playing, I could apply the exact same things, so it's really gives you a good base. It's kind of like taking if you want to be a vocalist, I think it's a good idea to start with classical
Oh
voice
yeah.
training because you learn how to protect your voice and breathe properly. And my mom and wife are both good singers, so I've kind of picked up a few things from them. But I you learn how to protect your voice more when you study classical, and then you can dip your toe into like, okay, well, here's how I can belt,
Yes.
but I know when it's starting to hurt my voice.
Yeah, it's always good to know the very basics or the very foundations of your instrument, so that way you can apply it to anything else. Like you said, learning how to work your way around the neck is going to be instrumental to, pardon the pun, to any other genre because you can apply certain things to certain genres, and you're going to make your style more unique because all the rock players probably haven't learned jazz,
Yeah,
and all the jazz players probably haven't learned rock. Uh, because they're, quite separate genres, and utilizing different techniques from both create something really unique and a really cool sound that isn't heard often.
yeah, and see, I love all those genres. I There's something about all of them that I enjoy, so I'm not a like, "Oh, I hate this genre," I enjoy, metal, blues, rock, fusion, jazz, and country as well. And country probably is the only style of guitar I haven't studied a ton. Like I love Brad Paisley,
Mm.
and Brent Mason and, you know, um, all those, I think Vince Gill, they're all like I love that style. I just haven't studied it as much.
So you started teaching guitar, and then what were some of the most valuable lessons you took away from Pat Martino or Greg Howe?
Well, Pat Martino, I think I only took 1 or 2 lessons from him because he's like a legend, so
Right, of
he's, like,
course.
expensive, and I also had to travel 2 hours for every lesson.
Mm.
This was before the internet really, where you could actually, like, do virtual lessons, and I remember what I learned from Pat. There's a little more backstory to Pat Martino, though. When I started to really get into jazz, um, one of my guitar teachers when I was at a community college before I went to Berklee to just get some of the courses that I didn't need to take at Berklee out of the
Right.
way. And I had a guitar teacher up there and he introduced me to Pat Martino's music and I was like, "Oh, that's I love," and I always say to people in every genre you can find someone who really resonates with you. And Pat Martino, I just loved his style. So I just got really into his stuff and, like, started to memorize it and such, and eventually, I was like, "Oh, yeah, he teaches in Philadelphia." And I sent an email and
Lo and behold.
yeah, and I was very nervous when I got there. And he is such unfortunately, he passed away,
Mm.
not too long ago. I think it was maybe 3 years ago, something like that. Um, he's an amazing person, but he is exceptionally smart. And I like when I'd ask him a question, I mean, it was probably a stupid question knowing me, but he'd analyze your question. And I was like, "Oh no, I made him pissed off." But then I realized he wasn't pissed off. He was just really answering my question in detail. But the things I learned from Pat Martino, like studying his style and going for a lesson, was Pat basically takes something that's very complex and he condenses it into something simple. It's called
Bite
conversion
size.
to minor. And it's where, like, when he looks at a jazz piece, he just thinks, okay, I'm going to take a minor seventh chord, the two chord, right? Because jazz is made up of 2 5 1s.
2 5 1s. Yep.
So if he sees a 2 5 1 over the two, he's just going to play the two arpeggio and lines based off of that chord shape, in different places on the neck. But then when it switches with the 2 and the 5, they're kind of in the same tension
Yep.
family. And then when it goes to 1, I think he usually would then use the 3rd degree of the scale, but the minor chord from that. So everything's based off of converting it to minor chords. So then all he has to do is think of that shape and everything. I think
everything
it's a little
works.
more complex than that, but that's kind of just a simple explanation of it. But just a brilliant person, and he actually he was about to have an aneurysm in 1980, and he went to the hospital, and they were like, "We have to do surgery on your brain. You're about to have an aneurysm." So he got that surgery, and then he forgot everything.
Really?
Blank after he woke up. Didn't know how to play guitar, didn't remember anything. Some of it came back, but he basically studied himself, and within about 4 years, learned how to play guitar again.
That's wild.
Yeah, so he's got an amazing story. Um, Greg Howe, you
Yeah.
also mentioned him. When I was at Berklee, I heard one of his CDs, I think it was Parallax, and I was like, "Oh my god, this guy's like all my favorite guitarists wrapped into one." It's like jazz, Eddie Van Halen type of stuff, blues, and I just, like, loved his playing, and I sent an again, I will reach out to anybody, I don't care,
Right.
and a lot sometimes they get back to you,
Yeah.
and so I reached out to his website. A year later, I got an email back, and so then Julie came with me, and we drove up and I took a bunch of lessons from him. And I think he lived in Easton, PA at that point. He moved a long time
Right.
ago. But we became friends with him and, his fiancée, and eventually they asked me to do that book because they knew I went to Berkeley, and I was like, I think I can transcribe that," because I knew music notation. And so then I basically kind of figured out, like, how do you make these Hal Leonard type, really professional looking tab books? So I got a program that kind of put it all together and made it look really nice, and then I figured out how to get one of those books printed. So then I started the long process of transcribing, his songs, which is very, uh, time
Time
consuming.
consuming, yeah.
Well, and he has these huge hands and a very, different way of playing the guitar. So you'll hear this stuff and you're like,
That doesn't make sense.
"Yeah, how is he playing that?" But then what was awesome about it is I think every 2 weeks, I would meet with him for, like, an hour or 2, and we'd go over everything I transcribed to just make sure it was accurate, so I got to meet with him and do lessons and
That's
ask
cool.
him stuff. So that's how that went, but yeah, at this point now years later, I'm taken from a Berkeley teacher again, so.
So, well, after teaching for a while, you started to create your own little studio and the perfect fifth. Tell me about that.
Well, that started, I started teaching at Ray's Music House, it's no longer exists, unfortunately, and, then I moved across the street to where Do Re Mi Pianos was and taught there for a while, and one of my students came in, and he was like, "Hey, I have a building on the Carlisle Pike, I wanna start a music school." And so I'm the kinda guy who, like, if I don't know how to do something, I'll just jump into it, and
Okay.
I'll figure out how to do it. But, now I look back and, that was kinda my first business that I had ever started. I had no idea what I was doing. And, it's I would probably would have done some things differently. But, yeah, I'm glad I started that though. So I moved out of my little studio um, in Lemoyne and moved into that building, which I think the building's been torn down at this
Mm.
point. But, I moved in and then just every day I was, looking for I'd start to scour the earth for, I wanted to put it together a place that had the best teachers in the area, and really get a reputation of like, this is the place to go where most of the best teachers are, high quality. And that's what I wanted is everything high quality. The place looked nice. It had great teachers there and it started to grow. And then, one thing I think we were gonna talk about was the whole Steve Vai
Yes,
masterclass.
I wanna know how that happened.
Well, we wanted to do something big for our grand opening, and again, I like to dream big,
Right.
and so I was like, "Let's get, like, let's bring some, like, really, like, well-known people into the Harrisburg area because I think people would love that, and I just Steve Vai popped into my head, and then I think what really the two things that got Steve Vai out here was the timing. He was between albums and he likes to do like music, uh, like schools, like this was like a school that was trying to do something good for kids, and be an arts place. And Steve Vai, I think, likes that. He likes, educating and helping a school out. So I think there was that, and he was in between albums. And then also we had, a little bit of a budget to pay him to, come out.
Right.
So you have to pay. Yeah.
Of course, of course.
And also, uh, we were at that point working with a guy named Terry, who's, he's got experience managing bands and stuff like that. And I think you have to know how to word an email when you send it to a manager of someone like Steve Vai, and he knew how to do that. So it was all those things coming together. So then once they were like, okay, we'll do this. I think I remember a lot of people volunteering their time to like, stuff pamphlets and get the word out. So there was a lot of people involved in that. And then, I was always good at organizing things. So, I did the graphics for a lot of the posters and stuff and website. Um, I kind of organized where it was going to be, the Whitaker Center, and worked with them. I also did a lot of back and forth with like DiMarzio,
Mm,
and the different companies that endorsed. I think Ibanez sent some guitars out,
that's cool.
for a giveaway and for us to, that we had Steve sign. So there was a lot that went into it. I remember planning that for like 4 or 5 months. And then it happened, I forget the actual date, but it was at the end of 2011. And there was this historic flood the same
Oh
week. And so
no.
Julie and our house, the basement was flooded, and I had to do that at the same time. So it was pretty crazy. And then I remember Steve, the day he flew in, um, number one, he cut his hair. So I don't know. I think I don't know why he cut his hair from the normal thing that he had, but so I didn't recognize him at first. But I walked into the airport and there's this guy standing with a guitar, and I'm like, Steve? And so then we, drove him to his hotel and got him set up there. And then the next day was the actual master class. And it went off pretty well, so
I can't imagine anything with the talent level of Steve Vai would go wrong.
he's just incredible. And I
Yeah.
mean, we had Justin Hershey, who like I've worked with, he's like a sound guy in the area. I think he's part owner or the owner of Rock Mill Industries, where we get our
Oh,
merch.
nice. Yeah.
I think Logan Sumney also is part of that. He used to be, man, I can't remember the name of the band. It's been so long, but well, anyways, look up Rock Mill Industries. But so basically, Justin did the sound, so I felt like he was in good hands. Like, so he made Steve sound amazing there, and Steve, like he just, it was incredible seeing him play all that stuff right in front of your face, and like just his performing and it was very cool. It was a quite an experience, and I still have people every once in a while like, "Hey, man, that was so cool. I still remember that when you brought Steve Vai out."
That's always
You know,
good when people remember it down the line.
yeah. But it was a lot of people that kind of helped that
Yeah.
come together, and then the Perfect Fifth kind of over time got a good reputation for having great teachers, and unfortunately, I think in the end, um, you know, uh, some of the different people involved, like my business partner, he wanted to go a different direction with it, and I was starting to get burned out after 4 years. It was intense to like,
Right.
I'm not really, my nature is not being an administrator, and I kind of found that out from doing that. I think I'm a good community organizer though,
That's good.
but we're kind of going different directions, and it just ended up, I just separated myself from it eventually,
For
and
the better.
it broke off. And
That's fine.
the Perfect Fifth actually still exists.
Yes, and they're nominated for a CPMA, I believe.
Yeah, I think well, it exists in, Mechanicsburg now.
Yeah.
Justin and Molly, who were teachers that I had, um, they, basically acquired the name eventually, and now it's a still going, you know?
Yeah.
It's different, it's a little bit different, but it's still going, and they're doing a good job, and there's a lot of teachers, you know? So,
And so by that time, the 4 years afterwards, you separated, you found Fedge and decided to put together a Rush tribute band.
well, after the Perfect Fifth, I started actually teaching at the Pollock Center,
Oh, I see.
in Camp Hill, and that's where I taught there for a while, and it actually worked out that, I left the Perfect Fifth because shortly after, my wife got this job offer for L'Oreal, which is an awesome company, and she had to move to New Jersey for it, though. So we ended up moving to New Jersey. So it kinda worked out because it would have been very difficult to leave the Perfect Fifth,
Right.
if to do that, you know? But, what was the question you had?
Rush
Oh, yeah,
Rush
yeah, yes,
Foundation.
Rush. That all started, it was in my mind, it was the Time Machine tour that really planted the seed in my brain for that. I remember I was a Rush fan for a while. I liked 2112. I remember studying that album a little bit when I was a kid. My cousin Aaron, I remember even earlier than that, when I think I was about 13, he gave me a cassette of Chronicles and was like, I'd never heard Rush before that. And he gave me a cassette of Chronicles and he was like, this is the greatest band that's ever existed. And I listened to it and I was like, it's pretty good. Because at that point, I liked noodly Eddie Van Halen stuff, and
Mm,
Steve Vai, and it wasn't noodly enough for me. But something about that music, it stuck with me. And I realized that later on during the Time Machine tour when we went to see them with my cousin or Julie's cousin, Jason. We went to Jones Beach Amphitheater, which is beautiful. And they were playing basically the Time Machine tour. They played their I believe it was their most current songs all, and then it went backwards from there. And I just was like, "Oh my god, I these songs have resonated in my brain and I didn't even realize it." Like songs like The Trees and, Limelight and The Spirit of Radio. I was like, I didn't even I don't know how to really explain it.
right.
I did go to the Test for Echo tour though. I remember doing that while I was living in Seattle. And that was then after that tour, they stopped for like 5 years because Neil's family passed. So 2011, I think, is when the Time Machine tour was.
And then, so fast forward, you put together this Rush tribute band. How did that start? You, mentioned Fedge, the drummer.
Yeah, and well, because of the Time Machine tour, I was like, "Rush, rush, rush." And I remember, our friend Mike Waskovich, who he'd probably be a good interview on here. Um, Mike's a drummer, and he also has a studio. Um, Mike, I think, was getting married and he was having a party at his house. And I'd met Fedge before. Like, I think we'd all played at the Arts Fest. So I'd met him a couple times. Um, but at that point, Mike was like, hey, you guys like both love Rush. You should meet each other. And so that's where I really met Fedge. I think for the first time. I may have done something with him at the Perfect Fifth too, and we played a couple Rush songs. But I just didn't think of starting a Rush tribute band at that point. But Fedge and I talked about it at that and at that party, and then we kept talking about it, and then a year later, we ended up having the first practice, and, it wasn't the current lineup. I think Mike Bitts was there from the beginning, but we had, like, a keyboardist and a different singer, and eventually, Julie sat in with us on one of our rehearsals, and she'd sung a couple Rush tunes in the Julie Schreiber Band because we did a lot of covers. And so she sat in and did a great job. And she goes upstairs, and because we always rehearse at Fedge's house. and Mike Bitts is like, "Uh, we should just have her sing in the band." And that's really how we all got together. I would say though, as a side note, um, I don't think we don't really talk about the band doesn't really talk that much about, who started it, who's the co-founder, or any of that
Right, right.
stuff. We're kind of like a family, and I think we realize we have this really nice chemistry together, where we all want the same thing. But I would say though, like Fedge, he is out of all of us the biggest Rush fan. I mean, he studies their set lists. And he, like, just he loves Rush. He's been to so many tours. So, I mean, he is the biggest Rush fan and, like, really kind of, uh, does a lot of the guiding of the ship in that band, and he puts a lot of work into it.
So tell me,
So, I have to
we
give him kudos.
we have one of the covers that you do for Solar Federation, Working Man. Tell me what goes into creating a cover of Rush for you guys.
Well, I mean, our point of doing these covers is to get as close as we can and be as accurate as possible to take, when a Rush fan comes in, we wanna take them to Rush La La Land. Where they're like they can close their eyes and feel like they're listening to Rush. We're not Rush,
Right,
but
of course.
we're trying to do our best to do it justice.
So with that in mind, see if you can imagine Rush with Working Man. And
Thank you
that
so
was
much. We are Solar Federation. It has been our pleasure.
it's Solar Federation. Hey, you heard it right there. So hopefully that gives you a little taste of what Solar Federation is and what Rush is as well. So tell me, you guys as Rush, you're one of a notable Rush tribute band. Tell me some of the experiences, the highest experience that you got to do.
I would say one of the most notable experiences was doing the the Neil Peart Memorial. And it was called A Night for Neil, and it was at the Meridian Center in Canada on, I believe it was October 22nd of last year. And it was actually supposed to happen in 2020.
But we all know what happened then.
Yeah, and that put it off for a while, and it kept getting rescheduled, and we were worried it wasn't going to happen. But then eventually it did. I remember 2 weeks before that came up, I was absolutely terrified. I could not sleep. I mean, because I was like, we're going to be playing at Neil Peart's memorial, or I mean, the closest thing to a public official memorial that there is and has been, you know, at this arena for thousands of Rush fans that know every note you're playing, and I was like, I've never played in that kind of a setting before with that big of a stage. And I was like, I don't know how I'm going to react to this. Am I going to pass out on stage?
Are gonna panic and make mistakes and be a big snowball?
Yeah. And so I was having trouble sleeping. And, and one side thing that happened during that was, speaking of COVID, our bass player gets COVID. I think it was like he got it 2 weeks before the show.
Oh, great.
And we're like, oh no, like, what are we going to do? But it basically happened where he was not contagious and he was back to normal by the time we had to go up.
Yeah, that's good.
But that was scary.
Yeah.
But we get there and we see the enormity of this arena and the lighting show and the big screens. And I think it dawned on all of us then what we were going to be doing. And I mean, Neil's family was there to watch. Peggy Giacone was there to watch. Lots of Neil's friends and a lot of our fans that we see all the time at shows actually were there as well and came up to the stage when we played to support us, which was awesome. But we were there all day.
And you guys were the headliners, right?
Yeah. So we got there at like 8:30 in the morning and stayed there until we played at, I think it was around 9 something at night. And then we played like about an hour or something set. And it was such a relief to it. I think we played very well. We practiced so hard for that. And we played the Necromancer, which I'm always terrified to play that song because it's like so long and it's got so many facets to it. And we really, I think we did a pretty good job on everything. And once it was done, I think all of us were just like relieved that we were able to pull it off, and one weird thing though was I wasn't used to Canadian fans. When we were at the arena, I'm looking out at the audience and I'm like, oh man, I don't think they like us, because there was like a huge group up at the stage and, you kind of get the impression that they like you.
Yeah.
But then the rest of the arena were like sitting and watching. And I'm like, oh man, they don't like us. And then afterwards, I asked a couple of people, and they're like, "Oh no! The Canadian fans are just very polite. They'll sit there and watch and be very polite." And I'm like,
That's
"Okay."
That's so interesting.
Yeah, it's like it just it's different in the U.S. Like,
well, because the U.S. they would like to party, so
yeah. But I mean, I'm pretty sure the Canadian fans liked us. So
that's good.
But that was one of the most terrifying and awesome things I think we've in my life, for one. But also as Solar Federation. I mean, it was just such an honor to do that.
And so we're kind of rounding out our time here. We'll have to have you back for another episode because you just have so much to tell.
I'm into it, man.
Yeah, I'm into it too. I didn't realize an hour went by. I was like, oh, okay. So
I didn't realize either.
You guys are up for a CPMA.
Yeah, we actually we got nominated last year and won, which was an honor, especially against some of the people that were also, nominated. And then this year we're nominated. I mean, who knows?
Who knows, right?
But
find out Thursday.
I think just to be nominated and then the the party that they, the whole ceremony and everything. It's it's I like seeing all these familiar faces that I haven't seen for a while. You know,
It's a great night of reconnecting, and it's happening this Thursday again at over at Hershey Theater. Um, Tickets are thinning out,
yeah.
and so if you want to go there, and there's also pre party after party.
Aren't you up?
I
You're
am up for it.
nominated
I
as
am.
well.
That's right. I'm nominated for the best music podcast, best local music podcast, something like that,
Yeah.
against Darker with Daniel and the I forget the other one. It's the drummer with Nate. I can't
Mm.
remember exactly what it is. I'm gonna kick myself for it, and I'm sure they'll kick me for it too.
Oh.
But
Well, I wish you luck.
thank you very much. I'm really excited just to go and see everybody that I've had on the show and see more people that have yet to heard of me yet.
They do it up real nice there.
They really do.
And I don't think we're gonna I don't think Julie and I are gonna go to the after party because we've got to get a good night's sleep because we
Of
have the
course.
show the next day.
Yeah. So this is a time where you guys in the audience can ask questions for Eric, and we'll get around to them. I have questions that I'm gonna ask. We'll have them again in the future to expand on Solar Federation, expand on a few of the other things we had to bypass for this episode.
Do you mind if I plug
Sure, go for
Mickey's
it.
Black Box?
Yeah, go for it.
So we're playing
That's
this.
actually my next question.
Oh,
Where are you guys playing?
yeah, we're playing at Mickey's Black Box this Friday, and Mickey's Black Box is in Lidditz.
Yes, a great space.
Yeah, I love some of the venues that are popping up are wonderful. That's one of my favorite to play. It's so beautiful and it's honors music, and the staff is awesome. They have great food and drink and everything, and the stage. I just
In the many ways you can layer that stage too. The mechanics of that stage is incredible.
Yeah.
Incredibly shout out to Mike Tate and all of his doings over there.
Yeah, it's incredible. And plus, like to perform on a stage that Yes performed on.
And so many more great
Yeah.
bands are gonna play on as well.
Yes.
It's an honor.
Mm.
So tell me, you mentioned the techniques that you were figuring out, learning, and then trying to expand on. What are some of the techniques that you still are working on or you still want to achieve?
I think I want to enhance my ability to improvise because as far as techniques, I can do most of the guitar techniques. Some may be rusty, but I know how to do them.
Mm.
Like maybe sweeping and alternate picking and all that stuff. But I think it's my ability to improvise, on the spot. That's one of the things I want to enhance more.
It's always interesting as a piano player myself. Whenever when someone looks at you and says go, and you're like, oh, I don't know if I can.
Yeah, Bill Evans, the famous jazz pianist, like that guy is such a great improviser. He's one of my favorite piano players in jazz to listen to.
So as a music instructor for over 20 plus years, what is one of the most instrumental pieces of advice you could give to students?
It's a good question. I would say that one thing I tell my students is find your passion in life and go for it. Because I would rather, and maybe, who knows, maybe I'm wrong about this, but I would rather fail at what I love to do and spend my life pursuing that than to do something I hate to do.
Right. Yeah. And this is and that goes beyond music, really. If because sometimes people think they're passionate about music, but then they find something that's even more so.
Yeah.
Uh, you're right. Find something that you're passionate about. And make it work. We wouldn't have the big institutions that we do have, like the Academy or what Hollywood, for example, if there weren't people that weren't not passionate about what they do, and there would be no DC Comics, no culture really,
Yeah.
if and no industry for that matter, if people weren't passionate and just worked at it constantly. And America's a great place to do that because
Yeah.
hard work pays off here.
Dream big and go for it. I mean, I think it's a good idea to choose something you have a talent for.
Oh, of
you know,
course, yeah.
But I think just go for it.
Go for it.
Because who would have thought? Like, I think when we started this Rush tribute band, who would have known we were going to we would have the honor of playing at Neil's memorial, you know? I just I think we were all surprised.
No, I was surprised when I started this podcast and I reached out to some of the bigger acts, like I mentioned Snarky Puppy, when the music was playing. But even like people like Daryl Davis or Catherine Britt, some of the people that I found on the show that and some of the people that I'm going to have on the show that have said yes to it. I never would have thought. I've only done this since the past April. It's not even been a year yet. And I've
Yeah.
been able to capture these incredible musicians. And the only reason why I was able to do that and talk to these people and connect to these people is because I just started and I'm passionate about it. You can do anything if you just start, and
It never hurts to ask.
it never hurts to ask. All and you know this as well from asking Steve Vai and asking all these people. It never hurts to ask. The worst they can do is say no, and the best thing that can happen is the best thing that can happen is that say yes.
Yeah, and sometimes they say yes,
Yeah.
you know? Yeah, it's just go for it.
So next time we have you on, I want to dive more deeply into the music education and also more of the rush stories because I know you have a lot of them.
There's a lot.
And so you can find Eric Wirsing. Where can people find you at? You have a website, solarfederation.com?
I think probably the best place to go is either my Facebook page or Solar Federation. I have ericwirsing.com,
Mm.
but it really, if you go there, I just have a coming soon page up with like my social links. I just haven't gotten around to rebuilding my website, you know, and I'm a perfectionist. So
Oh, me too.
like I won't get my website up until like
It's perfect.
everything's in place and I want it, you know, it's in my and
No, me
Julie's like,
too.
Eric, just get your website up.
I mean, me too. I mean, I had to have a person kick me in the butt to start this podcast because I was such a visionary. I wanted to, at the end of the show, have like a live performances with me playing piano and playing other people's songs, and just have it like be like a kind of like a Tonight Show kind of a thing where the band plays whatever. But you can always build up to that kind
Yeah.
of thing. And so that's another piece of advice that I'm going to give to everyone who wants to start something. Start from when you can, because the best time to start something is yesterday, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So with all that said, be sure to find Solar Federation at solarfederationband.com. They have their show this Friday.
I have a YouTube page as well. There's a bunch of videos on there. All that stuff. I think the links to that are on at my website. You know, YouTube, Twitter, all that stuff.
And that's Eric Wirsing. That's WIRSING.com. You can
Correct.
find him there. My name is Corey Rosen. This is the Story Podcast. You can find me at CoreyRosenProductions.com. That's CORYROSEN Productions.com. We can find out more about my personal projects as well as all past 143 now episodes of the Story Podcast.
It's impressive.
Thank you very much. And this Thursday, once again, I want to plug the CPMAs. That's over in Hershey. Please be sure to go if you're a musician. Yeah, it's a competition, quote unquote, and I know there's some controversy about that, but that's not really what it's about. It's about recognizing the local talent here, of which there is a lot, and everyone that's nominated. It's a tough win. It's not an easy win for sure.
It is. Yeah.
Every band that's been nominated has earned that nomination and will earn their award. It's a great program for recognizing local talent, and it helps us musicians to get some notoriety, some validity to our claims, and some establishment to our names.
Yeah.
So it's a really great program. Going to be a really great night. This is their fourth.
I believe so.
Yeah, and they're going to be having some great performances from the inductees too, from the Hall of Fame. So it's just going to be a great night and a great networking opportunity. And if you can't go to that due to tickets, please go to the pre-party or after party. They're free. The after party is at the Englewood. So, and it's a great spot as well. So
I love the Englewood too.
Go. This Friday, we're having Stephen Courtney on. He is a children's musician, an adult that does children's music. He has 5 songs on Sesame Street, and he has had his own award-winning TV show. And we're going to be continuing that story on Friday at 10 a.m. So please be sure to tune in for that. Then this Sunday, we have Conrad Fisher, a great Christian artist in the Harrisburg area. He's doing some incredible stuff over at Ragamuffin Hall, where he purchased a Presbyterian church and turned it into a really cool performing venue with some big names coming into that. I'm really excited to talk to him about that. Next Monday, we have Kid Rose, a local rapper in the area, trying to make a big difference in the urban scene here. Then Tuesday, I've got nothing. And next Thursday, I have Lancaster Bible College's own Rob Bingley and Ellie Hoover, who run the Trust downtown. It used to be the old Fulton Bank down, and they've converted that into an amazing concert hall where a lot of recitals and a lot of high profile classical musicians come through to perform, and it's a great, wonderful spot. And I'm really excited to hear about that whole story. With all that said, before we go, I want to plug in our new things that we have going on here at the Story Podcast. Because I'm becoming on episode 150, new merchandise will be coming out with the 100 through 150 on the back. Right now, we have the past 2 hoodies on sale on the website. So if you have been on an episode of this podcast or a fan of this podcast, please be sure to go buy some merchandise. It really helps me out, and it helps me grow this podcast. If you really want to support me, that's the best way to do so. Upcoming, we still have single and album reviews coming out, where we review singles and albums from the local area and give them some much needed attention to the local scene. And upcoming, we have our songwriter studio starting up, where we grab 2 or 3, 4 musicians of different genres. We sit them here in this table, and we crank out a song within an hour.
Wow.
Live.
That sounds really cool.
And it's really exciting. I'm really excited to get that started, because we have a lot of the former guests are very much for it. So we might have maybe John Milosevic, who's an accordion player, with Cody Tyler, who's a country singer, and then we have maybe Anthony Perricini, who's an incredible guitarist as well. And we're all going to see what happens.
Wow.
So if you want to learn more about that, please go to our website, CoreyRosenProductions.com. With all that said, I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of the day, and we will see you guys later. Bye.